information from the left, but comparing it to what Donald Trump spews out every day, every week, comparing it to what Elon Musk is spewing out, unfortunately, on X, there's no...
You were like, Bill, how can you, Mr. False Equivalency? It's like, no, Joe, come on. I thought you were Joe Scarborough. There's on a group of people who are not ideologically captured by either side. I am tired of the extremes and the extremists who dominate the debate. They have the megaphone. I consider myself an old school liberal. You have to make that distinction now because, you know, the word woke, which started out as a good thing, being alert to injustice, and a lot of people get triggered by the word. But there's a coalition of Trump voters, people who really like him. They certainly are those. And then there's people who don't necessarily like him that much, but they still think he's less crazy than stuff that strikes them as aggressively.
After Bill Maher and Joe Scarborough sat down for a candid exchange on MSNBC, what started as friendly banter quickly escalated into a fiery clash. As always, Maher didn't hold back. He called out Scarborough directly, criticizing MSNBC and the IEE broader woke brigade for completely losing direction, claiming he was one of the few remaining voices of reason on the progressive side. The fallout? Immediate. Somewhere a sensitivity siren was triggered. The outrage meter spiked. Woke Twitter clocked in at a dramatic 7.5 on the overreaction scale. But here, we cut through the noise, dice it up, and serve it with a generous helping of sarcasm. Welcome aboard. Hit that subscribe button and buckle up if you're here for sharp insight, unfiltered commentary, and fearless dismantling. Sure, misinformation from the left exists, but trying to equate it to what Donald Trump churns out weekly or to Elon Musk's online antics on X, not even close. Bill, really? False equivalence much? Joe protested. Come on, I expected better from you. The conversation rewound to a particularly stinging exchange where Maher had publicly mocked Scarborough for claiming the left doesn't spread misinformation. Yes, you heard that right. Maher flat out rejected Scarborough's depiction of the left as the pure stewards of truth. With his signature grin and pinpoint remarks, Maher dismantled that narrative, pointing out how even MSNBC had played a role in misguiding the public. He brought up the COVID era as a prime example, how the messaging constantly shifted, how dissenting voices were sidelined, and how the follow the science mantra often came across more like media strategy than medical guidance. Maher didn't just present facts, he spotlighted the arrogance, gatekeeping, and moral superiority that had enabled that environment to thrive. It wasn't just critique, it was an indictment. And Scarborough? Let's just say the realization hit him like biting into a sour lemon. His tone shifted. Maybe things have changed. Maybe I've changed, he conceded. Maher wasn't having it. He jumped in to challenge the notion that he had changed. Progressives often accuse Maher of shifting right, but in classic Maher fashion, he fired back, I haven't moved. The left has lost its mind. And frankly, he's not wrong. Once upon a time, being liberal meant standing for free speech, promoting independent thought, and holding institutions accountable. That was the very foundation of Maher's career. What's the progressive movement become now? A rigid, theatrical ideology policing machine more interested in virtue signaling than honest conversation. It ran so far from its origins it forgot what it once stood for. But Maher joining pro-Hamas protests? Don't even try to tell me the left hasn't changed, he said. And with that, the conversation was no longer just political. It was personal.
I will say this, though. Listen, I agree. There's been a change.
A movement that was once based on advancement and candid communication has turned into a never-ending competition to see who can be the most indignant. Simply put, Maher pointed out that the left is engulfed in identity politics, purity tests, and an unrelenting desire to exclude anyone who doesn't follow the same path. Disagreement, which was once a constructive aspect of democracy, is today viewed as treacherous. Rather of promoting discussion, they insist on uniformity. Intricacy? Don't remember it. Even a lifetime lefty like Maher is labeled as problematic the instant they deviate from the norm. It is authoritarian and has a stronger brand, but it is not progressive. Next voice, indeed. When woke was employed, it indicated alertness, compassion, and the pursuit of justice. It united people in support of genuine change and hardship. However, it has now been warped into something violent and theatrical, as Maher correctly notes. Rather than serving as an instrument for justice, it is frequently employed as a bludgeon to control, silence, and disgrace. He is against pretense, not against progress. Because when morality becomes a scoreboard and the word becomes more about power than cause, the true problems, racism, inequality, and injustice, become lost in a sea of hashtags and token anger. Furthermore, that is theater, not advocacy.
School liberal, you have to make that distinction now because, you know, the word woke, which started out as a good thing, being alert to injustice, and a lot of people get...
He delivered a scathing and unrepentant message. Liberalism didn't use to eat its own, but eventually the left lost its liberal identity, and that's when things went wrong. Maher specifically blamed MSNBC and other media organizations for contributing to the downturn. They repackaged the loudest, most radical voices as mainstream rather than challenging groupthink or promoting substantive discussion. Once the guardian of authority, journalism has turned into a platform for progressive ideology. They are curating narratives, stifling internal dissent, and mocking anyone who deviates from the plan rather than educating the audience. The goal is now compliance rather than truth. Additionally, they have alienated millions of Americans who are fed up with ideological speeches masquerading as journalism. That is precisely why Democrats continue to lose elections, according to Maher. The left turned away from reality, not the public shifted to the right.
Answer for, or for people have just used the word to ascribe a number of extreme...
It's interesting to note that Kamala Harris never truly moved away from the far left's extremes. In fact, she strategically placed herself in the center of it. Her advocacy of divisive policies, such as permitting biological men to participate in women's sports and enter women's spaces, sparked outrage from people of all political stripes. Instead of serving as a voice of reason or moderation, she leaned completely into the mayhem. In addition to alienating conservatives, her unwavering support for these concepts perplexed moderates and even unnerved some liberals. In times of actual crisis, whether it was border mayhem, surges in crime, or inflation, Harris frequently replied with evasive remarks, theatrical gestures, or silence rather than emerging as a unifying leader. At a time when Americans were yearning for solutions, clarity, and grounded leadership, she prioritized ideology.
That wasn't courage. It was capitulation. And the fallout from that fracture went far beyond just her polling numbers. The real challenge here for the Democrats is persuading skeptical voters that she isn't merely a covert embodiment of their worst fears, a hidden iteration of everything they distrust. Strangely enough, Trump ended up being the more composed and dependable candidate when it came to governance and direction. Sure, his personality was polarizing. He was blunt, confrontational, and unapologetically upfront. But his approach was rooted in the fundamentals: domestic energy, strong borders, public safety, and economic resilience. Regardless of how you felt about his demeanor, you always knew exactly where he stood. No doublespeak, no teetering to placate interest groups. That kind of transparency and fortitude wasn't just refreshing, it was essential. And because of that, he didn't simply eke out a win. He dominated as voters recognized that he was one of the rare politicians who actually delivered on his agenda. Trump's base, of course, includes passionate supporters. But there's also a massive segment of Americans who don't necessarily love the man. They just believe he's a lot less unhinged than the alternative, which often feels like chaos wrapped in progressivism. While Trump was putting policy into action, cutting red tape, slashing taxes, and brokering peace deals, Kamala Harris offered vague language and political catchphrases. His time in office wasn't consumed by symbolic gestures or elite pandering. He made calls, stuck to them, and showed up. Even those who didn't align with every word respected his authenticity and resolve. Meanwhile, Biden stumbled, literally and figuratively, meandering through public addresses, flip-flopping on direction, and leaning on advisors more focused on optics than genuine solutions. Bill Maher recognized it, as did many others. When the dust settled, Trump looked like the candidate with his footing solidly beneath him, and voters noticed. They remembered. Predictably, a significant swath of the media ignored it entirely, opting to shield, excuse, or reroute scrutiny away from their preferred candidates. Joe Scarborough, for instance, went into full deflection mode to protect Kamala and Biden. But the discrepancy was obvious. Real leadership can't be faked. It's either there or it's not. You can't manufacture confidence. Harris did try to offer a bit of introspection, something like, "Hey, I get where the blue team goes wrong. I said as much back in 2019 when we were all fighting for the nomination." She also acknowledged that some policy existed under Trump too. But that's the easiest play in the book. Say, "I don't believe that anymore," and expect the conversation to move on. And right there, Scarborough pulled a textbook maneuver, pivot to Trump. A subtle but calculated misdirection. It's the classic distraction game. Change the subject, blur the lines, and pray the audience doesn't notice the sleight of hand. But people do notice. Bill Maher nailed it when he exposed how the mainstream media has become an insular fortress, repeating its own narrative, defending its tribe, and avoiding hard truths. Instead of holding leaders like Kamala Harris accountable or pushing for meaningful answers, they default to spin. The echo chamber grows louder, but the credibility grows thinner.
He revealed how pervasive, performative, and detrimental MSNBC's prejudice is to public confidence in addition to criticizing it for its bias. The media's sole responsibility is to inform the public, "You're right." Not defend certain politicians, not fabricate stories, and most especially not become partisan propaganda factories. MSNBC and other media organizations fail everyone when they spend more time defending party lines than posing challenging questions. And it is voices like Maher's, clear, logical, and fearless, that serve as a reminder that journalistic integrity should take precedence above allegiance to a political group. More of that is required, far more.
Ground there. It's very difficult.
Two things can be true at one time.
And they are both true at one time.
Right.
I'm not personally responsible, but did I benefit?
It's just right, and you hit the mark. A network is no longer serving the public. Rather, it is advancing a political narrative when it becomes so ideologically ingrained that each section feels more like an editorial than a news broadcast. MSNBC has become an echo chamber rather than a forum for opposing ideas or difficult realities. And that's risky. The worst part is that bias disrespects the audience in addition to alienating the opposing viewpoint. Humans are not stupid. They are able to tell when they are being misled rather than given the facts. As a result, conventional media is losing credibility. The public is fed up with manipulation, spin, and being told what to think rather than being given the facts to make their own decisions. You're true. It seems like objectivity is a thing of the past at MSNBC. They will continue to sow discord, distrust, and eventually irrelevance until they, and others like them, begin prioritizing journalism before partisanship. Seeking the truth alone shouldn't be radical.
Living in. You know, the year 2024 is just very different.
Very different, right? Practically like comparing night and day. Even more so than 50 years back, maybe even just 2 decades ago. Your outcomes, the way life unfolds, the good and the bad, it's all connected to a deeper shift. That closing line, "It's not rebellion, it's common sense," really hits home. Well put. Right now, millions of Americans find themselves exactly in that space. The tension isn't simply between the left and the right anymore. It's between clear-headed thinking and ideological extremism. People aren't pushing back against progress. They're rejecting coercion. They're fed up with this warped idea that every term, value, or opinion must perfectly echo the current progressive orthodoxy, or else you're outdated, problematic, or worse. And someone like Bill Maher, who once stood arm in arm with those very same progressive voices, has now drawn a line. Not out of resentment, but because he refuses to let blind loyalty override logic. His message cuts through the noise because he's not some outsider yelling at the gates. He's coming from within. That's what makes it so compelling, because the ability to question and critique is essential for real evolution. A free society begins to unravel the second disagreement becomes dangerous. People are worn out by the rigid ideology. What they want is a return to common sense, honest conversations, and a country that doesn't punish people simply for thinking differently. You're more relevant now than ever, just so you know. I realize that now, hearing it said aloud, and that's why Maher resonates. He doesn't shy away from the awkward truth. He sees what's happening and calls it out. In this age of filters, phoniness, and performance, sincerity is a rare commodity. Americans are done with the choreographed outrage, the predictable talking points, and the sanitized media spin. They're craving genuine voices. Ones that reveal contradictions, disrupt herd mentality, and offer a little clarity in this upside-down landscape. Maher might not be everyone's favorite flavor, but he's got the guts to call out nonsense when he sees it. His impact? It comes from staying grounded in reason while others hide behind party lines and pre-approved scripts. For many, that's the fresh air they didn't know they needed. In an era drowning in bias and distortion, people like Bill Maher don't just stand out. They're essential. He might not tick every ideological box, but what matters most is that he tells it straight. That's why audiences are turning toward authenticity, even as traditional media sinks deeper into irrelevance. And that's exactly why Maher's voice carries so much weight right now. Thanks for tuning in. If cutting through the noise matters to you, hit that subscribe, leave your thoughts in the comments, and smash the like. I'll catch you in the next one.